Hey guys, today we're going to talk about Subic Naval Base. And this talks about reopening this. And what's happening right now is it's going through the government, and I guess it's got slowed down a little bit by the Supreme Court. Now, it doesn't look like it's going to be a U.S. naval base. It's going to be a Philippine naval base and probably Air Force base or whatever they're going to use it for. But it looks, from what I read, it looks like right now they're opening up for the Philippines so that they're closer to those islands, but then they're going to let like the U.S. pull in there if they need to, or fix ships in there, things like that. There's a lot of stuff going on with this. A lot of this is still up in the air, and it's not really written in stone yet because of everything being held up in the government. But it does look like it's going to open soon, in some capacity. Now, I think the Philippines might be a little bit afraid to say, hey, the U.S. is going to be using this. So they're not really saying too much about that in the story. In the story, it did mention about them maybe coming in there with their ships or whatever, reloading. Talked very vaguely about what the U.S. would be doing in there. Now, of course, once they open that base up, I'm sure the Philippines, because of what's going on with China, is gonna, open it up to the U.S. to some capacity. Only it'll be kept as a Philippine Air Force base. So the VHA is what comes into place now. And I guess they're going to do some sort of amendment to that. And then what's going to happen is then everything will be okay, if they haven't done the amendment already. I know that they've already been talking about this for a while. I'm sure it's already written up, and it might not have been signed or whatever yet. But anyway, it's kind of sunny out here. Anyway, what's going to happen is, I think by next year, once this gets through the Supreme Court, what will happen is then we'll start seeing like U.S. coming in here. Because a lot of those base buildings are kind of decrepit right now, and they need to be rehabbed. And they said that those buildings are not really that bad. Some of them are pretty old, but some of them have been kept up also. So what they would do is just rehab the buildings, rehab whatever they need to use there, and then step it up a little bit and get it ready so that we could have this as a base here. And even if it's a Philippine base in name, the U.S. could still come in and use it if the Philippines needed help or something like that, which is the good part, which right now they do need help, let's face it. Also, I guess China is saying, they've been saying this for quite a while, that they own like 80 islands or something like that are actually Philippine islands or whatever. And those islands are contested by other countries also. So now the question is, when the Philippines talks about how many islands they have, is it really that amount of islands, or is it minus 80? And I'm not joking about that. I mean, how do we count that now? Because if the Chinese are using those islands, and I believe that those islands that they count each year are in that count, I would imagine that it's 80 less. Unless we take those back. Because it's already been decided that those belong to the Philippines, but China says that they're theirs. So there's going to be a lot of contesting going on over these islands, and I'm sure once the U.S. starts stepping up their game a little bit over here, a little bit more, and there's a lot of talk up in Taiwan too, that if China has stated that if the U.S. puts a ship in their main port there, their deep water port, that's when the takeover begins of Taiwan. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and they've also threatened to nuke Japan. And then we also have the Solomon Islands thing going on, which apparently, from what 60 Minutes stated, I guess a bunch of people in the Solomon Island government got bribed with huge amounts of money, and then they allowed China to come in there basically. So these people that are really dirt poor are selling out their countries for all kinds of cash, I guess. And there's all kinds of stuff going on with cash behind the scenes, and it makes you wonder who's who because of that cash. So it is a little bit scary, and it gets worrisome when people start throwing around huge amounts of cash for certain countries or leaders or what have you. I mean, just look at the Solomon Islands. It makes one wonder who's with who half the time around here, in all these places. And I'm sure in Taiwan they have people getting bribed behind the scenes or whatever. And this is what gets worrisome, So who knows what's going to happen? I mean, people even here could get bribed by the Chinese, and I'm sure they've been offers the way things, work with China. Nobody knows. It's not factual, but I would say probably some people are getting spoken to, you know, and let's see what happens here, because it's getting scary. It's getting scary. You know, I don't like to talk politics too much here, but this was in the news today, so I just want to throw that out there. You know, it's just my thoughts on this thing, that, you know, let's hope that Subic gets built in some capacity, and in some capacity that the U.S. gets allowed in here. You know, let's hope that the Supreme Court takes a good hard look at this and says, hey, you know, we need to get this built and maybe have the U.S. use it or whatever. Because I think what they're afraid of is it's going to become a U.S. base. Okay, that's what they're afraid of, I think. And, you know, I'm sure there'll be some sort of agreements on how we'll use it, and the VHA and all this stuff comes into play, and it's certainly a lot more difficult than what it was before to have a base in here, because they've changed a lot of their laws, their constitution, things like that have been, you know, changed, and who knows what can happen here now. But let's hope, guys. Fingers crossed on this one, because I'm hoping for Subic to reopen. There's been talks about that Shipyard also, you know, going into American and Australian hands. Now, that wouldn't be a base. It would be a shipyard. So the ships would pull in there. Now, that would not be an American base. But our ships would pull in there, I'm sure, in some capacity. We would have some sort of manpower there to watch over the ships and things like that while they're in there. And I'm sure we would have some U.S. presence in there. There's a lot to think about during all this. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. And with China building up and the U.S. watching what's going on and sailing through here, they definitely need to be closer to the game. And this would get us a lot closer to the game, provided the Philippines allows us to do that. And let's keep our fingers crossed on this one, guys. This is big for the U.S. It's also big for expats that live over here, because it just makes us feel safer over here. I mean, right now, with the doors wide open, you know, we're not in a good place. We're not in a good, safe place militarily, because if China was ever to come in here, what would happen to us? You know, I know the U.S. would come in here and fight like crazy, but, you know, what would happen to us in the beginning stages if China was able to take over in the beginning and then the U.S. comes in? You know, it makes one ponder a little bit. But anyway, guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I also want to talk a little bit about Clark and Subic. A while back, there was a story in the news that China was going to loan some money to the Philippines. I guess it was 940 million or billion or something. I'm not sure about what the amount was, but it was quite a lot of money. And it was for a train between Subic and Clark. Now, it makes one wonder why China would loan money to build a train between Subic and Clark. You know, because it's strange, very strange. And that made me kind of ponder what's going on. Like, is that going to be used in a takeover? What would happen? You know, it's definitely a dangerous game that we're playing over here in the Philippines. And, you know, China's playing that game pretty hard right now. You know, they're playing it really, really hard. And leaves one to ponder, what the hell's going on? You know, because it seems like the U.S. is kind of behind the 8 ball right now, with them already, you know, planted on some islands and stuff like that. And China's really ruffling some feathers throughout the world, and right here in the Philippines, you know. And it's getting scary. Let's see what happens, guys. Let's hope for Subic. You know, let's hope that Subic gets in here. You know, whether it's a Philippine base or an American base or whatever it is, at least if it's a base, the U.S. could go in there and use it under the VHA if they're invited in there. And it seems like that's what the Philippines really wants to do, according to some of the articles that I've read here. But let's keep our fingers crossed and pray for that. We really need it right now. God bless, guys. Take care.